Hello everyone, this is Earth Archives. As the US presidential election is imminent, friends, do you know that there have been playoffs in US presidential elections in history? This US presidential election is said to represent the direction of the US national destiny. Let's take a look at the rematches of these 6 presidential elections. Before the show starts, please subscribe, share, and turn on the little bell. This will help us grow faster. Without further ado, the show begins. I see you're digging into the vaults of presidential electoral history. Quite the intriguing topic. Spot on, Perry's laser insight slices to the heart of the American ethos. Winners sit at the head table while the vanquished rarely get a shot at redemption in the political arena. The American public tends to look forward, hungry for fresh hope, new faces, and the promise of victory. General George Patton's quoting there is like a billboard along the political freeway, trumpeting a hard truth in the land where the underdog's tale is beloved, but only if it ends with a triumph. Yet, these historical anomalies, these 6 rematches you speak of, they're the exceptions that prove the rule, each one a layered drama where the comeback kid takes it all in the sequel. Sometimes, all it takes is a rejigged strategy, a change in public mood, or perhaps a sprinkling of good old-fashioned fate to flip the script. 1. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, 1796 and 1800. The whirlwind of early American politics, such a dance of ideologies and the sheer will to shape a fledgling nation. The Founding Fathers indeed had their reservations about political parties. After all, who'd want the soap opera of English political strife rerunning on American soil? They dreamt of a republic, virtuous and unmarred by the chaos of factions, yet the reality of differing visions and opinions soon outpaced their ideals. Imagine him, all those brilliant minds of the Revolution, stepping out of Philadelphia with the ink barely dry on the Constitution, only to gravitate into 2 opposing camps faster than you could say, Articles of Confederation. Irony laced with inevitability, you might say, as the Democratic Republicans rallied behind Jefferson's vision of a more agrarian, decentralized government and the Federalists under Hamilton sought a strong central government and an industrial economy. Big George Washington, the very figurehead of nonpartisanship, found his cabinet split between Jefferson and Hamilton as they laid the groundwork for the nation's first 2 political parties. Even with his aversion to factions, Washington couldn't prevent the seeds of partisanship growing under his own presidential roof. Then came his farewell address, a solemn warning against the divisive potential of parties, a caution that seemed prophetic as the political landscape veered into tumult soon after his departure from office. With the muddy process of electing a president and vice president, where second place could make you the Veep, the Electoral College showed its cracks early on. The contentious tie of 1800 between Jefferson and Burr. Now that's a saga. The political maneuvering, the backroom deals, the sheer high-stakes drama as the decision bounced to the House of Representatives. History doesn't hold back on the plot twists. It took 36 ballots, can you believe it, before Jefferson emerged triumphant to claim the presidency. Meanwhile, Burr, well, let's just say serving as Jefferson's vice president wasn't on his Christmas list. This electoral kerfuffle prompted the 12th Amendment, a constitutional tweak to ensure separate votes for president and vice president, thus avoiding another uncomfortable political marriage. It's a classic example of American politics, where passionate creations are attempted, their flaws realized, and solutions are forged in the fiery resolve to create a more perfect union. 2. John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson, 1824 and 1828. By the stars and stripes, the 1824 election was a real political potboiler, wasn't it? Talk about a narrative fit for a Hollywood script, only it's all draped in 19th-century cravats and top hats instead of CGI explosions. The Federalists, by then, were as relevant as powdered wigs in Congress, leaving the Democratic Republicans to duke it out in a free-for-all that almost guaranteed the Electoral College would throw up its hands and pass the buck to the House of Representatives. Jackson, with his war hero swagger, polled the highest number of electoral votes but still fell short of that magic majority. What unfolded next in the hallowed halls of Congress was a tale of political intrigue that would make Machiavelli himself slow clap in admiration. The so-called corrupt bargain that hoisted Adams into the presidency smelled like a backroom deal seasoned with ambition, leaving a bitter aftertaste called betrayal, an exclusive that would have topped every scandal sheet if they'd had Twitter back then. Slighted but not sidelined, Jackson, the very embodiment of a man scorned, transformed the Senate into his personal pulpit, preaching against the Adams administration's perceived aristocratic excesses. He fashioned himself as the populist hero, the rugged champion of the common man, turning his loss into the fuel that fired up his base. Cue the stage for the 1828 do-over. This time, Jackson wasn't leaving anything to chance or the House. The campaign trail was muddier than a Mississippi riverbank, with smears and slander flying like arrows in a medieval siege. But Ol Hickory's fiery vendetta resonated with voters who saw in him a leader untouched by Washington's tarnish. When the dust settled, Jackson clinched the presidency with an electoral avalanche that buried Adams' hopes of holding on to the White House. 3. Martin Van Buren and William Henry Harrison, 1836 and 1840. The drama of the 1840 election truly seems like it could have been lifted straight from the playbook of modern political strategists, doesn't it? Martin Van Buren and William Henry Harrison's face-off illustrates the ever-evolving theater of American politics, where catchy slogans, merch, and glamour shots, or in this case, flags and plates, can sway public opinion as much as, if not more than, policies and platforms. Van Buren, stepping out from Jackson's shadow, carried the mantle of the newly formed Democratic powerhouse into the 1836 race, only to run headlong into the fragmented but passionate opposition of the Whigs. The Whigs, bless their hearts, initially scattered their shots across 4 candidates, inadvertently handing Van Buren a relatively easy win. Yet, their disarray was a teething problem of a party finding its feet, and by 1840, they'd learned that unity, not division, was the key to challenging Van Buren's incumbency. The Whigs' decision to rally behind Harrison, the runner-up from 1836, marked a turning of the tide. Their first national convention wasn't just a gathering. It was a clarion call to consolidate under a single banner, spotlighting their candidate as a relatable hero. Old Tippecanoe, with his log cabin campaign, was ingeniously marketed as one of the people, a stark contrast to the aristocratic image painted of Van Buren by his opponents. With Tippecanoe and Tyler too, they didn't merely campaign. They serialized the election into a recurring melody in the American psyche, a tune of resilience against economic turmoil attributed to Martin Van Ruin. It was a masterstroke of branding, a spectacle of early political theater that captured an electorate hungry for change and nostalgia for heroic leadership. Harrison's landslide victory spoke volumes about the power of messaging, unity, and perception in politics, lessons that echo loudly to this day. Unfortunately, his tenure as president was cut tragically short, serving as a somber reminder of the fragile nature of human endeavors amidst the colossal march of democracy. 4. Grover Cleveland and Benjamin Harrison, 1888 and 1892. Isn't it rather amusing to think about Grover Cleveland's tenure as a presidential boomerang, flinging from office only to come winging back again? Truly, the 1880s and 1890s were tiptoeing on the edge of the modern era, complete with all the political shenanigans one would expect in an episode of House of Cards. Cleveland, the man who broke the Republicans' winning streak like a bull in a china shop, seemed set for a one-and-done stint until Benjamin Harrison's turn at the helm veered into choppy waters. Harrison, buoyed by his Civil War hero status and with the Harrison name still echoing in the halls of history, initially appeared as a formidable adversary. Yet, his stance on pensions and tariffs rubbed many the wrong way, stirring the political pot just enough to make Cleveland's comeback a feasible plotline. Meanwhile, Cleveland was nesting up in New York, presumably content with domesticity and his young wife's foresight. But just like a cliffhanger at the end of a thrilling season, the political portents aligned to set the stage for Cleveland's re-entry into the race. It's hard not to admire Francis Cleveland's confidence. Echoing down the years is an adorable mix of hope and assertion. The bevy of issues and unpopularity chomping at the bit of his success's term laid the groundwork for Cleveland's unexpected encore. Scooping the Democratic nomination as if it were the last dance at the ball, Cleveland twirled back into the White House with a decisive electoral victory. The political stars might have aligned, but it was Cleveland's tenacity and commitment to fiscal conservatism amid economic turbulence that sealed the deal. 5. William McKinley and William Jennings Bryan, 1896 and 1900. The political saga of McKinley and Bryan reads like an economic crusade that echoed through the heartlands and cities of America, pitting the sheen of gold against the promise of silver. McKinley, the bastion of enterprise and the gold standard, set himself as the embodiment of America's burgeoning industrial affluence. His conservative stance vouched for a country's wealth pinned to the shimmer of gold, offering a haven for the anxious titans of industry and banks whose ears were tuned to the clink of hard, yellow metal. But thundering through the towns and plains came Bryan, the populist champion, brandishing silver as the beacon of hope for the labored masses. His voice charged through the air like lightning, striking with words that roared about breaking the shackles of gold's elitist oppression. The 1896 Democratic Convention bore witness to Bryan's fiery oration, a speech that shot across the political bow, signaling the tempest of the silver campaign. Bryan, meanwhile, crystallized the malaise of the farming heartlands into a solid front, a silver bullet aimed at the heart of gold's dominion. His almost epic quest by rail traversed thousands of miles, seeding the winds with his vision of free silver, hoping it would sprout roots deep within the soil of the American electorate. The 1896 election would tilt towards McKinley, with his promise of a golden touch reflected in the influx of urban support. His win reflected a nation swayed by the allure of stability and growth, tied to the gleam of gold. The rematch in 1900 was set against an America riding the wave of economic vigor. McKinley's full dinner pail resonated as not just a campaign slogan but a tangible sensation felt by many, a testament to the economic wins under the gold standard. His triumph was more resounding, a seal of public trust in his leadership and vision. Yet, McKinley's second term would be cut short by the tragedy of an assassin's bullet, casting the shadow of mortality on the notion of power. In the wake of his death, the dynamic Theodore Roosevelt would step from the vice presidency to the presidency, marking the passing of the torch to a new embodiment of American energy and ambition. 6. Dwight D. Eisenhower and Adlai Stevenson, 1952 and 1956. A battle against a champion like Dwight D. Eisenhower must have felt to Adlai Stevenson like facing off against a colossus with the country as the Colosseum. Ike was the quintessential war hero turned political icon, and as Perry aptly notes, the American public has a penchant for generals who've navigated him to victory. The general's uniform often seems to weave an aura of invincibility and leadership that civilian garments seldom match. Ike's meteoric rise to political stardom was one for the history books. His bipartisan appeal, military glory, and strategic intelligence were iridescent feathers in his cap, alluring to both major political parties. Eventually donning the Republican red, Eisenhower presented a vision robust in conservative pro-business ideologies and stood firm against the tendrils of isolationist thoughts that had begun curling around some of his party fellows. The term, Cold War consensus wasn't a mere political tag but the emblem of a united front against the communist powers of the era. Standing shoulder to shoulder, both Democrats and Republicans saw in Eisenhower a stalwart bulwark against the red tide. Stevenson, graced with intellect and charisma, was in many respects a knight in shining policy armor. His tenure as governor painted him as a forward thinker whose ideas were perhaps just too ahead of the Eisenhower overshadowed times to be fully appreciated. Indeed, echoes of his progressive policies would later